The Winchester rifle cracked through the mountain air just as Reverend Peabody asked if anyone objected to the union. The wedding party scattered like startled deer as a massive figure emerged from the pine forest, smoke still curling from his weapon's barrel. "I object," rumbled a voice that hadn't spoken to another human soul in a decade. Cassandra Bellwether stood frozen at the altar in her cream silk dress, her veil fluttering in the mountain breeze as she stared at the wild man who'd just disrupted her wedding to the wealthiest merchant in Cedar Falls. The stranger was enormous, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that could block out the sun and a black beard that reached his chest. His buckskin clothes were weathered but clean, and his dark eyes held an intelligence that contradicted his savage appearance. "Ma'am," he said, removing a battered hat to reveal thick black hair streaked with premature silver, "I haven't seen a woman in 10 years, and I'll be damned if I let you marry that snake." Cassandra's intended groom, Mortimer Gildenhart, scrambled to his feet from where he dove behind a pew, his pristine white suit now dirt-stained. "How dare you interrupt a sacred ceremony? Sheriff Dawkins, arrest this madman." But Sheriff Dawkins was backing away slowly, his hand hovering near his sidearm, but making no move to draw it. Everyone in Cedar Falls knew the legend of Flint Ravencrest, the mountain man who disappeared into the wilderness after his family was massacred by raiders 10 years ago. Some said he'd gone mad with grief. Others whispered he'd become something more beast than man. "Gildenhart's been selling watered-down medicine to the Crow tribe," Flint continued, his rifle still trained on the cowering merchant. "Children have died because of his greed. You really want to marry a man with blood on his hands?" Cassandra felt the bottom drop out of her world. She'd agreed to marry Mortimer to save her father's failing ranch, but if what this stranger said was true, that's preposterous, Mortimer sputtered. "You can't believe the ravings of a hermit who's clearly lost his mind." Flint's smile was sharp as a blade. "Lost my mind, have I?" He reached into his coat and produced a ledger, tossing it at Mortimer's feet. "Found this in your warehouse last night? It's funny how your books show full-strength medicine going to the reservation, but the bottles I tested were mostly water and sugar." The crowd murmured angrily as they processed this information. Several families had friends among the Crow, and the recent outbreak of fever that had claimed so many lives was still fresh in everyone's memory. Cassandra picked up the ledger with trembling hands, her educated mind quickly deciphering the damning evidence. Mortimer had indeed been cheating the tribe, selling them useless concoctions while charging full price for real medicine. "You lying, murdering bastard," she whispered, then louder, "You were going to let me marry you knowing what you'd done. Cassandra, darling? Surely you don't believe she slapped him so hard the sound echoed off the mountain peaks? Don't you dare call me darling. This wedding is over." Mortimer's face twisted with rage. "You'll regret this. Your father's debts are—" "Mine to worry about?" Flint interrupted, stepping closer. "The lady said the wedding's over. What business is it of yours, mountain man?" Flint looked directly at Cassandra, his dark eyes intense. "Because I'm going to marry her myself." The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm. Cassandra stared at him in shock, her heart hammering against her ribs. This wild stranger wanted to marry her. A man she'd never met, who lived like a savage in the mountains. "You're insane," Mortimer sneered. She'd never agree to such madness. But Cassandra was studying Flint's face, seeing past the wild exterior to something deeper. There was pain there, yes, but also honor. This man had risked everything to expose Mortimer's crimes, to save her from a life of unknowing complicity in murder. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Flint's expression softened slightly.
"Marry me."
"Instead, I've got gold enough to pay your father's debts, and I give you my word you'll be treated with respect and kindness. As for the rest, he gestured to the mountains around them. We'll figure it out as we go." The crowd held its collective breath. Reverend Peabody clutched his Bible like a lifeline, clearly overwhelmed by the day's events. Sheriff Dawkins watched, nervously, unsure whether to intervene. Cassandra looked at Mortimer, then at Flint, weighing her impossible options. Marry a murderer who'd deceived her, or trust her life to a stranger who'd lived like a wild animal for a decade. "I haven't seen a woman in 10 years, Flint said quietly, his voice carrying only to her ears. "But I remember what it means to protect something precious." Something in his tone decided her. "Reverend Peabody," she called out, her voice ringing. "Clear across the mountain meadow. Continue the ceremony." But with a different groom. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs as Cassandra stepped away from the furious Mortimer and moved toward Flint. Her hands shook as she removed her engagement ring and let it fall to the grass, but her voice remained steady. "Are you certain about this, Miss Bellwether?" Reverend Peabody asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "Marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly." "I'm certain," Cassandra replied, though her heart hammered like a war drum. She looked up at Flint, studying the planes of his rugged face. "But I have conditions." Flint raised an eyebrow. Clearly not accustomed to negotiations. "I'm listening, ma'am." "First, you'll answer my questions honestly. Second, if this marriage proves unsuitable, we discuss an annulment after 1 year. And third," she lifted her chin defiantly, "you bathe before our wedding night?" A rumble that might have been laughter escaped his chest. "Fair terms. Though, I should warn you, my cabin's a far cry from town living, and we'll improve it together." Mortimer's face had turned purple with rage. "This is insanity, Sharif. You can't allow this farce to continue." Sharif Dawkins shifted uncomfortably. "Well, Mortimer, seeing as how Miss Bellwether is of age and willing, and considering these allegedities about your business practices, I reckon she's free to marry whoever she chooses." "Those are lies, fabrications, then you won't mind." "If we search your warehouse," the sheriff replied with newfound authority. "In fact, I think we'll do that right after this wedding." Flint handed his rifle to a trusted-looking rancher and moved to stand beside Cassandra at the makeshift altar. Up close, she could smell pine sap and wood smoke on his clothes, along with something wild and clean that made her think of mountain, streams, and open sky. "Before we proceed," she said quietly, "tell me your real name." "Flint Ravencrest. Used to have a ranch in the valley before. ... Typo quotes, his jaw tightened. "And you've truly been alone for 10 years. Every long day and longer night, his dark eyes met hers. What about you? Why were you marrying Gildenhart? My father's ranch is failing. Mortimer offered to pay our debts in exchange for marriage." She paused, then added, "I thought I was sacrificing myself for family. I didn't know I was nearly sacrificing my soul." Reverend Peabody cleared his throat. "If we're going to do this, we should proceed before anyone else objects or shoots." The ceremony that followed was unlike anything Cedar Falls had ever witnessed. Cassandra spoke her vows to a man whose calloused hands dwarfed hers, whose eyes held depths of sorrow she could only imagine. When Flint repeated his vows, his voice carried across the meadow like distant thunder, promising protection, respect, and fidelity until death. "Do you have rings?" the Reverend asked. Flint reached into his coat and produced a simple gold band. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "Been carrying it all these years, never knowing why." As he slipped it onto her finger, Cassandra felt a strange sense of rightness, as if some cosmic wheel had finally clicked into place. The ring fit perfectly, as though it had been made for her hand. "I don't have a ring for you," she whispered. "Don't need one. Having you is enough." "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana," Reverend Peabody declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. May kiss the bride." The crowd fell silent as Flint cupped Cassandra's face in his huge hands with surprising gentleness. For a moment that stretched like eternity, they simply looked at each other, two souls finding unexpected anchor in a storm of circumstances. When his lips touched hers, the kiss was soft, reverent, nothing like what she might have expected. From such a wild man, it tasted of possibility and promises yet to be kept. "Well, I'll be damned," Buck Morrison muttered from the crowd. "Never thought I'd see Flint Ravencrest come down from those mountains, let alone get married." The spell was broken by Mortimer's furious departure, accompanied by 2 of his hired men, who'd clearly decided their employer's coin wasn't worth staying, for what promised to become an unpleasant investigation. As the crowd began to disperse, offering congratulations that ranged from genuine to bewildered, Cassandra's father approached. Josiah Bellwether was a proud man broken by circumstances, and his weathered face showed both relief and worry. "Mr. Ravencrest," he said formally, extending his hand. I suppose I should thank you for... whatever this is." Flint shook the older man's hand carefully. "Your daughter saved herself, sir. Ow. I just provided an alternative about those debts. We'll discuss them tomorrow. Tonight I need to get my wife home before dark." The word wife sent a shiver through Cassandra that was part fear, part anticipation. She was married to a stranger, about to ride into the wilderness with a man who'd lived like a hermit for a decade. But when Flint helped her onto his massive horse, his touch was gentle, and when she settled against his broad back for the ride to his mountain cabin, she felt safer than she had in months. The mountain trail wound upward through stands of towering pines and across rocky ledges that offered breathtaking views of the valley below. Cassandra clung to Flint's leather coat as his horse, a magnificent black stallion named Thunder, picked his way sure-footedly along paths that seemed barely wide enough for a man on foot. "How much further?" she called over the wind. "Another hour," Flint replied. "You doing all right back there?" "Managing." In truth, her silk wedding dress was entirely unsuitable for mountain travel, and her feet were already growing numb in her delicate slippers. But she'd made her choice, and Cassandra Bellwether, now Ravencrest, had never been one to complain about consequences. As they climbed higher, the air grew thinner and cooler. Flint seemed to sense her discomfort because he shrugged out of his heavy coat and passed it back to her without a word. The garment was enormous on her small frame, but it smelled of pine and leather and the indefinable scent that was purely him. "There," he said, as they crested a ridge. "Home," Cassandra gasped at the sight before them. Nestled in a natural clearing surrounded by protective peaks was a sturdy log cabin, smoke curling from its stone chimney. A small garden plot showed evidence of careful tending, and a crystal-clear stream meandered past the front door. It wasn't the rough shack she'd expected, but a real home, well-built and lovingly maintained. "It's beautiful," she breathed. "I'd built it with my own hands," Flint said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "Took me 3 years to get it right." As they approached, several animals emerged from the forest, a massive wolf-like dog that wagged its tail at Flint's whistle. It's a deer that barely glanced up from their grazing, and a red-tailed hawk that circled overhead before landing on a post near the cabin. "You have quite the menagerie," Cassandra observed. "They're not pets, just ... neighbors who decided to stick around. That's Kodiak," he nodded toward the dog. "Found him as a pup with a broken leg. The deer are Willow and Branch. They show up every evening for scraps. And that's Redwing up there. She keeps me informed about weather and visitors." Flint helped her down from the horse with the same careful gentleness he'd shown all day. Standing in the clearing, Cassandra felt dwarfed by the towering peaks around them, but not threatened. There was something peaceful about this place, something that spoke of sanctuary. "Let me show you inside," Flint said, suddenly seeming uncertain. "It's not fancy, but it's clean and warm." The cabin's interior surprised her again. The main room was spacious, with a stone fireplace large enough to cook in, handcrafted furniture that showed real skill, and shelves lined with books, more books than she'd expected to find in the entire town of Cedar Falls. "You read?" she asked, running her fingers along the leather spines. "Had to do something during the long winters. Ordered them from back east, traded furs for them." He watched her examine his collection with obvious anxiety. Not the kind of thing a lady would enjoy. Cassandra pulled out a volume of Shakespeare, then Dickens, then a treatise on natural philosophy. "These are wonderful. I've read many of them, but some are new to me." Relief flooded his features. "The bedroom's through there," he said, nodding toward a doorway hung with a wool blanket.
Ow.
"I'll sleep out here until you're comfortable with other arrangements." His consideration touched her deeply. "Thank you. That's very thoughtful." "I know this is all strange and sudden," Flint continued, running his hand through his dark hair. "I don't expect. That is, I won't force anything you're not ready for. We're married legal-like, but that doesn't mean—" "I understand," Cassandra said softly, "and I appreciate your patience." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with the weight of their impossible situation. Finally, Flint cleared his throat. "I should tend to thunder and get some firewood. There's water for washing in the basin, and I've got some clothes that might fit you better than that dress." He paused at the door. "Are you hungry? I could make us some supper. That would be nice." After he left, Cassandra explored her new home more thoroughly. The bedroom was simple, but comfortable. The large bed covered in quilts that looked handmade, a wardrobe, and a small window that offered a stunning view of the valley. She found the clothes Flint had mentioned, men's shirts and trousers. That would be huge on her, but infinitely more practical than silk. She changed quickly, rolling up sleeves and pant legs, then braided her long auburn hair to keep it out of the way. When she emerged, she found Flint building up the fire, and the sight of him made her breath catch. Without his coat, she could see the play of muscles beneath his shirt, the easy way he moved despite his size. "Better?" he asked, looking up from the flames. "Much, though I feel like I'm wearing a tent." His eyes swept over her appreciatively. "You look good. Natural." Heat rose in her cheeks at the compliment. "What can I do to help with supper? Can you cook?" "Well enough. My mother insisted I learn domestic skills, though I always preferred books to kitchens. Then we'll get along fine. I'm a decent cook. Had to learn to survive, but I'd welcome the company." Working together to prepare their simple meal of venison stew and fresh bread, Cassandra began to see glimpses of the man Flint had been before tragedy drove him into the wilderness. He was intelligent, well-spoken when he relaxed, and surprisingly gentle for someone who looked like he could wrestle bears. "Tell me about your family," she said, as they sat down to eat. "You mentioned having a ranch." His face closed off immediately. "That's a conversation for another day, of course. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. You have a right to know who you married, just ... Give me time to find the words." They ate in companionable silence, the fire crackling warmly between them. Outside, night sounds began. The hoot of an owl, the distant howl of wolves, the whisper of wind through pine boughs. "Are you afraid?" Flint asked suddenly. Cassandra considered the question honestly. "A little. This is all so far outside anything I ever imagined for my life. But no, I'm not afraid of you, if that's what you mean." "Oh, good. Because despite how I live, despite what people say about me, I would never hurt you. I believe you." And strangely, she did. Cassandra woke to the sound of an axe biting into wood and the smell of coffee brewing over the fire. Pale morning light filtered through the cabin windows, and for a moment she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came flooding back, the interrupted wedding, the mountain man who'd claimed her, the impossible choice she'd made. She dressed quickly in the oversized clothes and emerged to find Flint stacking split logs near the door. He'd already been up for hours, if the size of the woodpile was any indication, and his dark hair was damp with sweat despite the cool mountain air. "Morning," he said, pausing in his work. "Coffee's ready, and there's fresh bread and honey on the table. You've been busy." Habit. Mountain winters teach you not to waste daylight. Over breakfast, they discussed practical matters, what supplies they'd need, how to winterize the cabin for 2 people, the logistics of her father's debts. Flint had gold, he assured her, cashed from years of trapping and trading, enough to clear Josiah's obligations and keep the ranch running. "Why?" Cassandra asked finally. "Why help us? No, you don't know me, don't know my family, anything." Flint was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "Maybe because I remember what it's like to lose everything. Maybe because that bastard Gildenhart needed stopping, and you were the lever I could use to do it." He looked up, his dark eyes intense. "Or maybe because you're the first person in 10 years to look at me and see a man instead of a monster. You're not a monster. Aren't I? I've killed men, Cassandra. It's more than I care to count. Some deserved it, others ... double quotes." He shrugged. "The mountains don't make fine distinctions about justice." "What happened to your family?" The question hung between them like a blade. Flint's jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then slowly the words began to come. "I had a wife. Rebecca and a daughter, little Lily, just turned 4. His voice grew distant, remembering. Oh, we had a small ranch in the valley, nothing fancy, but it was ours. This was in town one day, selling cattle when raiders hit. Comancheros mixed with some white renegades. Cassandra's hand moved instinctively to cover his, offering what comfort she could. When I got back, the house was burning. Found them. ... He swallowed hard.
Found them both in what was left of the bedroom.
Rebecca had tried to hide Lily under the bed. Oh, Flint buried them up there. He nodded toward a distant peak. Then I went hunting. Took me 2 years to track down every man who'd been part of that raid. Some went easy, some went hard, but they all went down. After I had nothing left but ghosts and guilt. Couldn't go back to the valley, couldn't stand to be around people who looked at me with pity or fear. So I came up here and ... stayed. They sat in silence as the morning sun climbed higher, painting the cabin walls with golden light. Finally, Cassandra spoke. I'm not trying to replace them. No. And I'm not trying to replace whatever dreams you had before yesterday. My dreams weren't very grand. Marriage to a man I barely knew, keeping house, maybe children someday. She smiled sadly. At least with you, I know the marriage was my choice. Or did I corner you into it? You gave me an option when I had none. That's different. A commotion outside interrupted their conversation. Kodiak was barking furiously, and Thunder was snorting and pawing the ground. Flint was on his feet. Instantly, rifle in hand. Stay inside, he commanded, moving toward the door. But Cassandra was already reaching for the shotgun she'd spotted mounted above the fireplace. I can shoot. Can you hit what you aim at? Well enough. Flint nodded grimly, then watched the back window. Someone's coming up the trail, and my animals don't like their scent. Through the front window, Cassandra could see 3 riders approaching the cabin. Even at a distance, she recognized the lead horse. Mortimer's distinctive white stallion. Her blood turned to ice. It's Mortimer, she whispered. He's brought men. Figured he might try something like this. Flint checked his rifle's load with practiced efficiency. He strike you as the type to let a public humiliation stand. The riders pulled up just outside rifle range. Mortimer sat his horse with forced confidence, flanked by 2 hard-looking men who wore their guns low and ready. Ravencrest. So Ensab called out, I've come for my bride. Your bride married me legal yesterday. Flint shouted back, best ride on back to town before someone gets hurt. That marriage was a farce, coerced under threat of violence. I'm taking her home, over my dead body. That can be arranged. One of Mortimer's hired guns was already sliding his rifle from its scabbard when Cassandra made her decision. She stepped into the doorway beside Flint, the shotgun steady in her. Hands, I'm not going anywhere with you, Mortimer, she called out. I know what you did to those children. I'd rather die than be married to a murderer. You heard the lady? Flint added. Now get off my land before I lose my patience. Mortimer's face contorted with rage. You want her so badly, mountain man? Then you can die for her. He spurred his horse forward as his men raised their weapons. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd assumed they were dealing with a half-crazy hermit and his frightened bride. Instead, they faced a trained killer protecting the first thing he'd cared about in 10 years, and a woman who'd rather fight than surrender her hard-won freedom. The battle for Cassandra's future was about to begin. The first shot shattered the morning stillness as Mortimer's gunman fired from horseback, his bullet splintering wood inches from Flint's head. But Flint was already moving, diving sideways as his rifle cracked in response. The hired gun toppled from his saddle with a scream, clutching his shoulder. Get down. Flint barked at Cassandra, but she was already dropping behind the heavy wooden table he'd overturned for cover. Mortimer and his remaining gunmen had dismounted, using their horses as shields while they poured lead into the cabin. Windows exploded in showers of glass, and bullets thudded into the log walls with deadly rhythm. "There's only 2 of them," Mortimer shouted. "Rush the door." But as the second gunman broke cover to charge the cabin, Cassandra rose with the shotgun and pulled both triggers. The double blast caught the man's center mass, stopping his advance permanently. Jesus. Mortimer dove behind a boulder as Cassandra calmly broke open the shotgun and reloaded. "Where the hell did you learn to shoot?" "Father taught me," she called back. Said any woman living on a ranch needed to protect herself. Flint had repositioned himself at the shattered front window, his rifle trained on Mortimer's hiding place. "Give it up, Gildenhart. Your men are down, and there's nowhere to run. Not leaving without her. Then you're not leaving." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring. Mortimer was pinned behind his rock, but he still had ammunition and desperation on his side. Flint and Cassandra held the stronger position, but they were trapped in the cabin. That's when Redwing began to scream. The hawk's cry echoed off the mountain peaks in a pattern Flint recognized, a warning of more riders approaching. Through the back window, Cassandra could see dust rising from the valley trail. "More coming," she reported tersely. Flint cursed. "How many can't tell? Could be more of his men? Could be ... The question was answered when Sheriff Dawkins' voice rang out across the clearing. "This is Sheriff Dawkins. Everyone put down your weapons." Mortimer's laugh was bitter. "Too late, Sheriff. The mountain man already killed 2 of my men. After you shot first," Cassandra yelled back. "We were defending ourselves." Sheriff Dawkins rode into view with 3 deputies, all with guns drawn but pointed skyward in a gesture of official neutrality. Behind them came an unexpected sight: Cassandra's father, riding hard despite his age. "Cassandra," Siah Bellwether called out. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Papa Gildenhart," the sheriff commanded. "Come out with your hands up. We found your warehouse, and you're under arrest for fraud and poisoning." "This is about more than business," Mortimer snarled. "That savage stole my bride." "Your bride married another man of her own free will," Sheriff Dawkins replied. "Now surrender your weapon before someone else gets killed." For a moment, Mortimer seemed to consider compliance. Then his face twisted with rage, and he raised his pistol toward the cabin. "If I can't have her, no one can." The shot rang out, but it wasn't Mortimer's gun that fired. Flint's rifle spoke from the window, and Mortimer spun around before crashing to the ground, his unfired pistol skittering across the rocks. The sudden silence was deafening. Smoke drifted from the cabin as Flint emerged slowly, his rifle ready but lowered. Cassandra followed, the shotgun broken open to show it was safe. Sheriff Dawkins dismounted and approached Mortimer's still form. After a moment, he looked up grimly. "He's dead." "He was aiming to kill my wife," Flint said simply. "I won't apologize for protecting her." "Nor should you," the sheriff replied. "We all saw him draw first." He gestured to his deputies. "See to the wounded man, and get these bodies ready for transport." Josiah Bellwether hurried to his daughter, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "When we heard shooting, I thought—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'm all right, Papa. We both are." The sheriff approached Flint, his weathered face serious. "There'll have to be an inquest, but it's clear-cut self-defense. Won't be any charges filed." "Appreciate that, Sheriff. There's something else." "We searched Gildenhart's warehouse and found enough evidence to hang him twice over. Watered-down medicines, forged documents, even records of bribes to territorial officials." Dawkins shook his head in disgust. "You did the territory a favor, exposing him." As the deputies loaded the bodies and tended the wounded gunmen, Cassandra surveyed the damage to their cabin. As the windows were gone, bullet holes peppered the walls, and her wedding dress from the day before was shredded by flying glass. "We can fix it," Flint said quietly, following her gaze. "Together, if you're willing to stay." She looked at this man who'd risked everything to save her from a terrible fate, who defended their home with deadly skill, who treated her with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with his fearsome reputation. Try to make me leave, she said. With a smile that made his heart skip a beat, Sheriff Dawkins mounted his horse as his men prepared to depart. "Oh, Ravencrest," he called out. "Found something else in Gildenhart's papers. Seems he was planning to foreclose on the Bellwether Ranch next week. Those debts your father mentioned? They've been paid in full? Gildenhart was just going to steal the land." Josiah staggered at the news. Paid. But how? Gildenhart's been collecting payments for months, but never forwarded them to the real creditors. He was running a swindle, planning to seize properties all over the county. As the sheriff's party rode away, trailing dust and justice in equal measure, Cassandra felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd carried for months. Her father's ranch was safe, her marriage was real, and the man beside her had proven he would die before letting harm come to her. "So," Flint said, surveying the bullet-riddled cabin with rueful humor, "how do you feel about home improvement projects?" Cassandra laughed, the sound bright and clear in the mountain air. "I think it's going to be an adventure." 3 months later, the cabin bore little resemblance to the bullet-riddled structure that had weathered Mortimer's attack. New windows gleamed in the morning sun, shutters painted forest green flanked each opening, and flower boxes overflowed with late-blooming wildflowers that Cassandra had transplanted from the meadows inside. The transformation was even more dramatic. Cassandra's touches were everywhere. Curtains sewn from fabric ordered from Denver, a proper kitchen table with matching chairs, rugs woven from wool traded with shepherds in the valley. But it was still unmistakably Flint's domain, with his books, his hunting trophies, and the massive stone fireplace that dominated the main room. "Hand me that beam," Cassandra called from atop a ladder, where she was hanging new curtains in the bedroom. She'd grown comfortable with heights during the renovation, much to Flint's dismay. "I still think you should let me do the high work," he grumbled, steadying the ladder with one massive hand. "And I still think you worry too much," she replied, stretching to hook the curtain rod in place. "There. Perfect." She climbed down gracefully, and Flint caught her at the waist when she reached the bottom. Pulling her close for a kiss that still made her toes curl after 3 months of marriage, what had begun as a arrangement of convenience had deepened into something neither had expected: real love, built on shared work, honest conversation, and the kind of trust that only comes from facing danger together. "Papa's coming up the trail," Cassandra observed, looking out the new window. Indeed, Josiah Bellwether was making his weekly visit, his saddlebags bulging with supplies and news from town. Since discovering that his debts had been fraudulent, he'd thrown himself into rebuilding his ranch with renewed vigor. The knowledge that his daughter was truly happy had given him new purpose. "Cassandra? Flint?" he called as he dismounted.
Ow.
"Wait until you hear what's happened in town." They gathered around the kitchen table as Josiah unpacked his news along with coffee, sugar, and letters from back east. "Sheriff Dawkins got word from the territorial capital," he began, his eyes bright with excitement. "They want Flint to serve as a special deputy for the mountain districts. Seems word's gotten out about how he handled the Gildenhart situation." Flint frowned. "I'm not looking for a badge, Josiah. It's not a regular badge. Special assignment work. Tracking fugitives, investigating crimes in remote areas, that sort of thing. Pays good, and you'd work mostly alone." Cassandra studied her husband's face, seeing the conflict there. "What aren't you telling us, Papa?" Josiah's expression grew serious. "There's been trouble up north. Renegade Sioux have been raiding isolated ranches, and the army can't track them through the high country. They need someone who knows the mountains, someone who can, handle difficult situations." "You mean someone who can kill without conscience?" Flint said flatly. "You mean someone who can protect innocent people from men who'd murder families?" Josiah's voice carried the weight of a father's fears. "Someone like what happened to your Rebecca and Lily." The name of his first family still had the power to make Flint's hands clench into fists. Cassandra reached across the table to cover one massive fist with her small hand. "It's your choice," she sighed.